Welcome back to Learning is the New Working. It's brought to you by me, Chris Pirrie, and the Learning Futures Group. And welcome to this episode, which is part of our Season 4, which is also known as Learning for Good. Now, if you're a regular listener to Learning is the New Working, then you'll know that this season we're doing something slightly different. We're exploring workplace learning practices of the $200 billion international aid and development industry. I've partnered with my seasoned co-curator, Lutz Ziob, and we'll be talking to practitioners in the development sector. They're all building skills for a range of different professionals, including aid professionals in large and small, international and local NGOs, and also focused on building capacity at the point of need, so there's sustained impact for social good in the world. In particular, we'll be looking at the Global South and the African continent, and I think we're going to learn a lot. We believe that there's a lot that corporate learning professionals and learning leaders can learn from this sector, where capacity building is a key ingredient, whether it's the incredible rate of tech adoption in the Global South, the need to operate at global scale with large volunteer forces, the critical importance of localization, the agility and innovation born out of necessity and tight resources, or, the same as us, the need to help people be skilled and capable and ready for a different kind of future. Today's guest is Nick Martin. He's operated in this sector for 10 years and describes himself as an educator, technologist, and social entrepreneur. He's the founder and CEO of Washington-based TechChange. It's a social enterprise that provides online training on a variety of technology-focused and global development topics. In the last 10 years, TechChange has worked with hundreds of leading social sector organizations to design over 800 engaging and community-focused online courses for audiences all over the world. Nick's also a faculty member at Columbia and Georgetown universities, and he serves on the board of PopTech, a global network committed to the vanguard of emerging technology, science, exploration, and creative expression. We have a great, free-ranging conversation that talks about technology, the deployment in the Global South, how to build engaging courses, and what drove Nick and TechChange to the mission that they're on. Let's listen in to my conversation with Nick Martin. Nick, welcome to Learning is the New Working and our special edition around Learning for Good. So welcome to the podcast.
Absolutely. Excited to be here.
Great. Well, we usually start with some quick questions to help orient our listeners to you and the work that you and your organization are doing. And I know that we have lots to talk about in terms of the role that workplace learning plays in your sector. So we'll start with a few questions, then we'll go deep. How's that?
Sounds great.
Great. So first of all, whereabouts am I talking to you? Where do you live and why do you live there?
I am here coming at you live from Washington, D.C., born and raised.
All right.
And for us, the best place to do this kind of international education meets technology work that we do at TechChange.
Great. So we're going to get into that, but can you tell me what your job title is and then what do you really do on a daily basis?
Yeah. So I am the founder and CEO, which means that everything that no one else wants to do, that's what I do. And I'd say I probably spend about half my time on partnerships, business development, and the other half designing educational experiences, both online and in person.
And what is the mission of TechChange?
So, Chris, we build beautiful and engaging online courses on topics that matter, and we primarily focus on the international development and humanitarian social sector side of things.
Great. And what's the origin story? Why did you form TechChange in the first place? What was the opportunity that you saw?
Sure. So, well, to go way back, I was a modern poetry major at Swarthmore College.
I love it.
And then couldn't find a job after I graduated. My dad thought it would be great if I became a CIA agent. Okay. And tried to set me up with some of his buddies to become a spy.
Okay.
And then I said, no, I'm not going to do that, Dad. I want to go study international education, human rights, peace building at a little school called University for Peace in Costa Rica.
Ah.
So armed with all those degrees, I ended up coming out of that experience really energized about international education, but without any skills. And so I taught myself a lot of technology, learned how to build websites, and then started to see that there were a lot of people around the world who were really hungry for new kinds of skills, who just didn't have access to traditional types of education.
And if I can ask, what is the business model or the funding model that you operate under today?
Sure. So we think of ourselves as a full service learning solution. So primarily it's businesses or organizations that would hire us to build and deliver courses on our learning platform. They can white label it, and then we can actually provide both the delivery mechanism and the kind of content authoring expertise to create whatever kind of experience. So for us, it's a little bit less like a MOOC where you've got tons of learners in a self-paced environment, and more suited for groups of learners, cohorts, and blended learning models that are trying to do more community-focused learning.
I definitely want to dive a little bit deeper into how you do what you do, and your thoughts around what works in distance learning and workplace learning. But how long have you been in business, and what are your sort of proudest accomplishments around the work of TechChange?
Sure. So it's been a decade for us here at TechChange. And in that time, we've built almost 800 courses. So tons of amazing experiences, and all over the world, getting a chance to work with some phenomenal partners. But a couple highlights. We built the first online course in Sudan, and that was pretty exciting. We built one of the first scaled trainings on malaria in Uganda and Nigeria on how to actually test for malaria. Mm-hmm. We've been doing more recently all the, we call it Digital Development 201 curriculum for USAID staff. And then really recently, partnering with TechSoup and Microsoft to provide courses to small and medium-sized nonprofits on digital transformation. And I know you're a Microsoft guy, so excited to talk more about that if there's interest.
Yeah, I mean, long legacy of Microsoft helping in the space, and it's great to see that partnership with TechSoup and Microsoft. That's exciting. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Let's get into things a little bit. And for our audience who may not necessarily be from the sector, you describe the vertical segments that you work in on your website. You talk about social change. You talk about international development. Can you help our audience understand the landscape, and then what is in scope and out of scope for you?
Yeah, it's an evolving target a bit. I mean, we will provide support to all countries and their aid organizations and the many companies and organizations that service and get funding from those aid organizations. But it can be disaster relief, humanitarian focused. It can be international development, so health, agriculture, education focused. We don't take money from defense contractors or organizations. We do try and keep our social mission focused on values and topics that we think are going to make the world better. But within that, we also do a lot of work domestically in the U.S. and internationally, so there is a bit of a spectrum.
What about your students, the people who are taking your courses? I think you say on your website you have over 20,000 students that you've taught. What do you know about them? Where do they live? What are they most interested in?
Yeah, it's gone up a bit, so we're now closer to about 50,000. But for us, we have mostly adult learners, so people who are 5, 10, 15, 20 years into their career. And it really does vary. All of them are trying to tackle social challenges or problems in some capacity. But we have found that more and more we're getting folks who are 20, 30, 40 years into their career who are very worried about being left behind, who feel like digital transformation, technology is moving so fast, and they need to stay current. They need to do that. And organizations that are recognizing that as well. And I think there's a lot of territory we can cover there about reskilling and upskilling additional existing workforces. But that's what we're seeing in terms of our students.
Now, just for clarification, your students are working in what we might call the aid industry. Are they working for international NGOs, or are they in the global south? Do you have a sense of the sort of geographical spread of your learners?
Yeah, historically we've had about 60 to 70% coming from the global south, and I think a big reason for that is there just aren't good trainings for folks who are in countries that are hard to reach, that are in parts of the world where there are not strong university opportunities. And so online learning is, in many cases, the only option. And for us, we really take the time and the effort to make that learning experience a quality one. So we are seeing more and more folks from the global south taking our courses, and they have a very specific type of need when they take a course. And the incentive structures are really aligned around certifications. How can I, as a professional in Nigeria or Uganda or Cambodia, distinguish myself from my colleagues? It's through certifications. It's through these types of trainings. They don't have to be long, multi-year courses, but anything I can do to seem a little different, to have certain skills that distinguish me, that really matters.
Interesting. So it's not that you are sort of modernizing a face-to-face training business that exists. It's technology is allowing you to go places that otherwise would not be served.
I think that's exactly right. And it is interesting to me coming up against some of the challenges of in-person training in the world of aid and development. We get into the wonderful world of per diems, where people are paid oftentimes to go to trainings. And so once you make a training online, you've really cut into funding for people to do training. And so you depend more and more on an intrinsic motivation. I think that's important. I think it's a dangerous game to pay people to go to trainings. And at a certain point, if people aren't intrinsically motivated to learn the things that they need to learn, there isn't going to be the kind of retention and engagement we need. But that's certainly a hurdle for us, because that is a world that is alive and well in training related to aid.
Oh, that's interesting, and I wasn't aware of this. So you're saying that if I went to a face-to-face class, I get a stipend, or I get a sort of per diem kind of payment. If I take an online class, I don't?
Exactly. So in many cases, international aid organizations will pay attendees of workshops to show up, and they will pay both money for them to go, and they'll sometimes also pay per diems, which are just lump sums of money that go towards lodging and food, but oftentimes are pegged to international rates set by the United Nations or World Health Organizations. And those dollar amounts can oftentimes exceed the amount it actually costs to pay for housing and food and lodging. And so if you're a savvy attendee, you can actually make some money on your training.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, but when you do it online, you don't have that, and so that is a challenge to get people to engage with online content, because they're not necessarily being paid to be there, because there is no need for housing and food. They're not leaving their home.
Are there efforts to engage international organizations and funders to change that?
Tons, but it's a deeply entrenched industry, and it comes with a lot of baggage and expectations. And so it is tough. It is tough, because a lot of times the folks we're trying to reach are very, very busy and engaged people. So it's really a game of time and incentives.
Wow, that's really interesting, and quite an opportunity there to make some change. While we're on the topic, I wanted to ask you, it's clearly a time of tremendous change in the aid and development sector. All the forces at work on the private sector are also at work on the aid sector, and then a whole bunch of others as well. What do you see as the big macro challenges in the sector, and how can learning and the kind of work that you're doing find opportunity to help?
Yeah, it's such a good question, Chris. I think there is this fundamental tension between, are we just trying to be compliant, or are we actually trying to build capacity? And that's probably similar to the private sector. Where it's different I think, is in how organizations that are really at the level of their missions designed to serve and help people